In the dark and twisted corridors of ancient Rome, one of the most shocking and bizarre episodes of imperial history unfold. Story that is often overshadowed by the chaos of the empire itself. Sporus, a young boy, was thrust into the most unimaginable of fates, becoming the unwilling symbol of Emperor Nero's insanity and cruelty. His life, marked by humiliation, manipulation, and betrayal, was shaped by one man's obsession with power and control. Sporus was not born into a life of nobility or grandeur. He was just another boy in the Roman Empire, likely of humble origins, but fate had different plans for him. His life would be altered forever when Nero, the infamous Roman emperor known for his ruthlessness and decadence, laid his eyes on him. Nero, known for his erratic behavior and terrifying impulses, was grappling with the tragic death of his beloved wife, Poppaea Sabina, who died in 65 AD, allegedly due to Nero's violent outburst. The loss of Poppaea left the emperor broken, desperately seeking a replacement for the woman he loved. But Nero's twisted grief would lead him down a path few could imagine, ultimately directing him to Sporus. The young boy was brought before Nero, who was intrigued by his appearance. Sporus' resemblance to Poppaea, the dead Empress, would become the focus of Nero's obsession. But Nero's desires were dark and disturbing. He ordered that Sporus be castrated to resemble the woman he had loved, turning the boy into a grotesque mirror of his dead wife. Castrated and mutilated, Sporus was forced into a role no one, especially not a young boy, should ever endure. The transformation was not just physical but emotional as well. Sporus, once a young child with a life ahead of him, now found himself trapped in a nightmarish existence, forced to live as a grotesque replica of Nero's dead wife. To further solidify his place in Nero's twisted vision, Sporus was dressed in women's clothing and even forced to take on the role of Nero's new wife. Nero took Sporus as a consort, parading him in public as though he were Poppaea reincarnate. Nero's obsession with the boy knew no bounds. He had Sporus publicly married to him in a ceremony that mocked the sanctity of marriage and the power of the emperor. For the people of Rome, this spectacle was both shocking and scandalous. The emperor's actions were a reflection of his growing madness and his need for control. The empire, already in turmoil from Nero's tyrannical rule, was left to witness one of the most depraved and tragic episodes of royal excess. Sporus, once a mere boy, had become the symbol of Nero's unchecked power, forced to play the part of a woman in a man's world, a world that had no compassion for the innocent. The public's reaction to this cruel manipulation was one of horror and disbelief. It was not just a violation of Sporus' body, but an assault on the very essence of his humanity. He was no longer allowed the freedom to live as himself, no longer given the choice to be a child or grow into a man. Instead, he was molded to fit Nero's whims, his life reduced to nothing more than an object in the emperor's mindless pursuit of self-gratification and emotional satisfaction. In the halls of Nero's palace, the boy's fate was sealed. He had been reduced to a mere pawn in a political game, his life and identity stripped away by the whims of an emperor who believed he could control everything, even life itself. As Sporus continued to live, under Nero's domination, the world outside remained unaware of the torment he endured. Little did anyone know, the full horror of Sporus' tragic existence had only just begun. Sporus, now a living reflection of Nero's twisted desires, became a central figure in one of the most bizarre and disturbing chapters of Roman imperial history. His existence, once marked by the innocence of youth, was now a grim testament to the emperor's deranged need for control and self-indulgence. The public marriage to Nero was just the beginning of a life filled with torment, manipulation, and constant degradation. Sporus' humanity was stripped away, and in its place, a puppet was born, one that would dance to the emperor's whims, forever trapped in a role he never asked for. Nero's obsession with Sporus did not end with the mock marriage. Nero began parading the boy, now his wife, through the streets of Rome, showcasing him as a symbol of his power and his delusions. At public events, Sporus was expected to act as a proper wife, dressed in extravagant robes, adorned with jewels and carrying herself with the grace expected of a Roman empress. But this was not a position of honor. Sporus was not revered. He was an object, a living testament to Nero's cruelty. His every move was dictated by the emperor's desires. But Nero's treatment of Sporus went beyond mere public display. Behind closed doors, the emperor's actions were far more sinister. Sporus was not just forced to embody the role of Papier. He was also subjected to emotional and physical abuse. Nero's obsession with the boy grew darker, and his treatment of Sporus became increasingly cruel. The young boy, now a puppet in Nero's twisted vision, endured a life of suffering. No love, no kindness, no mercy could reach him in the emperor's palace. His life was an endless cycle of degradation, humiliation, and subjugation. Despite being paraded as a wife, Sporus was never treated with the respect or status of a true empress. He was a replacement for the woman Nero had lost, but no matter how much Nero tried to force Sporus into the image of his dead wife, the boy could never escape the reality of his situation. The horrific abuse that Sporus suffered at Nero's hands was emblematic of the empire's corrupt and decaying moral state. No one in Rome dared speak out against the emperor's actions, for fear of falling into his wrath, and so Sporus was left to endure his fate in silence. But the cruelty of Nero's reign could not last forever. By 68 AD, Nero's empire was on the brink of collapse. His rule was marked by increasing violence, extravagant excesses, and a general disregard for the welfare of the empire. The people of Rome, exhausted by Nero's tyranny, began to turn against him. Revolts broke out, and Nero, once considered invincible, found himself without allies. It was in the final days of his reign that the tragic fate of Sporus took a dark turn. As Nero's reign crumbled, so too did the fragile existence of Sporus. The emperor's power was slipping away, and in a final act of desperation, Nero's enemies turned their attention to the emperor's most vulnerable symbol, Sporus. As a living embodiment of Nero's insanity, Sporus was seen as an object that could be discarded once Nero fell from power. The boy who had been forced into such a grotesque role now found himself at the mercy of those who sought to dismantle Nero's legacy. In a cruel twist of fate, when Nero took his own life in 68 AD, Sporus was abandoned by those who had once used him as a pawn. His future, already filled with torment, now faced the ultimate betrayal. What became of Sporus after Nero's death is a tragic mystery. Some accounts suggest that he was murdered shortly after Nero's suicide, but the details of his final days are lost to history. What is certain, however, is that Sporus' life was one of unspeakable cruelty and manipulation. He was a pawn in a game of power, stripped of his humanity and subjected to the whims of a mad emperor. The story of Sporus is one of tragedy, sacrifice, and manipulation on a scale that is hard to fathom. His life was destroyed by Nero's obsessive need to control everything, even life and death. Sporus was not only forced to replace the woman Nero loved, he was forced to live a life of unimaginable suffering, trapped in a world that had no place for him as an individual. His story serves as a dark reminder of the horrors of absolute power and the lengths to which some will go to bend others to their will. Sporus may have been forgotten by many, but his story remains a chilling testament to the dark undercurrents of imperial Rome. A boy, castrated and broken, who was forced to live out the rest of his life as a replacement for a dead empress. His story speaks of the cruelty and depravity that lurked behind the grandeur of Rome's imperial reign. His tragedy echoes through the centuries, a reminder that the cost of power is often paid by the innocent and the vulnerable.